Okay, let's take a look at Power Struggle. This is just a review. I'm trying to sum up some of the thoughts I had during the game and some of the experiences. As I said at the intro, I've played this sucker once two-player, which isn't a legitimate way to play it. And actually, excuse me, it was intriguing enough in that condition that I was interested in whether or not I had found something pretty exciting here. It's Z-Man games, and Z-Man always puts out pretty decent components. Let's talk a little bit about those. Each player has their own little player aid. These are nice, moderately solid little pieces of stock. Strangely enough, they're written in English and French. Not sure why French in particular was seen as the alternate resale. It's possible, since the rules are only written in English, that they made additional cards in other languages as well, and then, you know, they could just give you double-sided with two languages. But if you happen to be with French speakers as well as English speakers, this particular version gives you some advantage that way. The paper money is kind of cool. The stock on the pieces is good. Like I said, Z-Man's always pretty good at putting things. There's the little gimmicky thing of these little checkbooks. You know, to me, they're completely unnecessary for the game, but they're kind of cute and whatever. The tiles, all high quality there. Cubes, how can you go wrong with cubes? Well, cubes and meeples, I've seen some pretty badly deformed, so I guess we could say these aren't badly deformed. The map, my wife really likes the board. The building and the way it represents it. Me, I find it, I don't know, a little too tall and faceless, but maybe that's something it's trying to present in the view of it. Anyway, this is a game that, in terms of topical representation or adherence to subject matter or anything like that, fails completely. It's not that it's purely pasted on theme. It does kind of try to fit the subject in some ways, but wherever there's any kind of question of, oh, we want a mechanism to do this, or we want this to be representative of something, the decision was, well, this mechanism's cool, throw out any need to tie it or link it to anything in particular. More than that, obviously, there's no simulation value here or anything. In fact, it's hard to tell who you even are. You're not on the board. You're not a chairman of the board. You're not one of the board of directors. You're not within the company trying to create changes. You're just some dude who's pulling the strings from outside the game, in a sense. You know, who isn't even one of the normal power players in a corporate structure. You're not a CEO or something like that. You're not a board member. You're something amorphous. It's like, you know, in a Civ game, you're God. Well, in this, you're the God of some faction that makes no sense because there's such churn in the company. And there's a number of other aspects. Like I said, some of the mechanisms don't make any sense at all. Some of them maybe do, like bribery. You could say, well, there's a threat that resources will be restricted from a particular office or something. Fine, whatever. So the game has to stand as a game. And as a game, I suspect maybe, it has a significant possible flaw in terms of the balance of the different options that you can take. I think some of the choices in terms of the different victory conditions, and the victory conditions are essentially the different tracks up at the top of the map. There's one additional one, which is which causes this problem to be serious, actually. So, to a large part, you could say, well, why not just not follow the ones that you want to? Well, the reason for that is that each player is handed out a secret set of victory conditions. And those secret victory conditions are a particular foe that you must beat in a particular set of otherwise normal victory tracks. The problem here is that you'll expend resources trying to get the point that you have from your arch nemesis at the same time that you're expending to achieve the points on the track. And the thing is, if the points on the track align with what's on your card, you get a slight advantage. You get to put some effort into tracks, trying to keep ahead of your opponent. There may be some mitigating factors to this, though, which is to say, tracks that no one's competing on, it might be very easy to beat your arch nemesis on that track and then just say, screw it, it's not worth going on. So for example, if you decide stock is just never worth it, and I suspect that may be the case, then you kind of get a free pass on that. You only have to buy one certificate in order to do it. So the game may be able to overcome what seems at first to be kind of a hideous unbalance, given that you're handed this kind of secret victory condition thing. I'm not positive one way or another. In terms of the play of the game, there's some interesting aspects to the mechanisms. So the bribery design, where you are offering money for an ability another player has, you'll get a better version of that ability. Okay, so then money has to be important, but money doesn't seem terribly important. Now, if they don't take the bribe, you get to hurt them a little bit. Okay, that's probably not going to be enough to sway them. But here's the biggie: if they do take the bribe, they get a victory point level in the corruption track. They get a level on the corruption track, and that's a very popular track for people to be competing on. Most of the competition arch nemesis card combinations will have corruption on it. So that's a very, very competitive track. One where just getting the single victory point may be possible, but you may not be able to be the top guy. You may not be able to beat the guy that you're trying to beat on that track if he's also competing on it. We had an interesting situation where two of the players were both competing they had each other's cards, and they were both competing on some of the same tracks, and that kind of inflated corruption in particular. But corruption is fairly cheap to get, so there is some balance there, as opposed to stock shares, which are not terribly easy to get in quantity and not at all easy to get to the victory point level. In fact, the victory conditions to the game are very intriguing. I'm just very worried that imbalance will cause problems, especially among newer players. You might warn them that's a bad track, but then they won't understand the subtlety of when it's good to invest in the bad track, right? If that kind of situation comes up, or they might just think they're behind the 8 ball because they have a card that says they have to go on they should go on that bad track, and then they either want to invest in it or not, and don't quite see that kind of subtle opportunity to just invest a little bit in it, get part of their victory point for the competition part, and then be able to devote more resources to the other tracks. Of course, it does mean they've drained a few resources off on this track that's unimportant. But all they have to reach on one of the other tracks that they pick then is the minimal victory level. They don't have to be competing with anyone. They have no desire for that, but on the others they will. So that could be kind of an interesting, there is some potential for getting away from whatever unbalance there may be. Otherwise, as a game, I enjoy the play style. I don't enjoy it solitaire terribly much, although when I get away from the camera, it's kind of more fun. Basically, you're constantly evaluating a decision. There's a little bit of change in the situation that takes place, but it's usually not too drastic. So plans can go forward over, the course of a round. Yeah. Especially for the communications player who gets to stack the deck, which is another neat mechanism. There's a lot of neat little parts to this game that make me think that I'd like to explore it more, that if I had a regular gaming group, this would be something that would come out once a year or something, which is about the best anything would with me. As it stands, though, the group that I do go over to play with, usually nobody's interested in playing. Basically, it's divided into two sets. There's a lighter Euros group and a heavier, more into war games or older style games group. And what seems to be missing is that blend that I really like, which is, okay, we'll play a big game today, but we have time to play, 1 or 2 Euros on the edges of our gaming day. Maybe because the big games take longer, whatever. Maybe because people aren't willing to call a big game partway through and say, it's obvious who's going to win. Let's do something else. Yeah, there isn't really that kind of groundswell within the games. Anyway, this is something that I think I would enjoy somewhat, although I do have some concerns about how it'll play out in the long run. It seems to me, for all the kind of clever little mechanisms in it and for how not difficult it is to play, it doesn't require a whole hell of a lot of, you don't really have to sit there analyzing everything. I guess you could. Anything can be, overanalyzed, but I find myself usually fairly easily deciding what I want to do with this, even though there's no link to the reality under it. I think the thing that hurt it the most is probably the rule book. The rule book is a fucking mess. Not that it's, wrong. It's pretty, it seems unambiguous. It seems reasonably, coherent, but there are a few problems. One is, first of all, a lot of color embedded in it, which may just be a problem for me, but then the examples are kind of embedded in the rules in a way that it just doesn't read right. And I would say probably that's a big inhibitor to it. Now, games like Power Grid have troublesome rules too. This, though, is a little bit more complex. There's a few more, there's more options in front of you at any given time and whatever. And there's something about the way that the turns are structured. Stacking the deck, the difference between rounds and turns and all that. It's a little bit more complex, so it maybe takes a little longer to wrap your head around it when you're reading the rules. So I don't know. I think they would be an inhibition, that the game is a little bit more complex than can handle this style of rule book. Probably should have a little bit more discipline in the writing of rules, like older style games did. Modern games seem to think that as long as you put lots of pictures and examples embedded in the rules, people will figure them out. And that's true if you're giving them 4 pages of rules. You'll note, though, that even Monopoly is probably too complicated, as simple a game as it seems to explain, to go with that style of rule book. And that's, this is probably on that same level of complexity, which just shows you what something like Power Grid, with its 4 or 6 little pages of rules, actually how simplistic, how simple the rule set is. And the designer just makes a mess out of them, so it's very hard to figure them out. Anyway, this is one I'm kind of pleased to have gotten. I'm still not, decided on it, how much replay it has. Certainly for me, not much. Nothing does, but whatever. I think overall it's kind of positive. There's some cute factors to it, some neat little design ideas. I just don't expect it to make any sense as, in terms of giving you any understanding about corporate maneuvering. gives you nothing. It gives you no feel for that. It's a mathematical game where you're trying to, acquire certain victory points by doing certain things, and that is all it is. You're not even going to get hints as to what you should be doing. For example, what does it mean to be holding the shares? Who is it that's holding the shares? Why doesn't that influence who's on the board? All these things that just... You're left there asking nothing but questions if you try to make any sense out of this game. All right, let's end it up.